The poor girl only had $5 for a blind date. The single dad millionaire at the next table watched her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. The title of today's story is The Poor Girl Only Had $5 for a Blind Date. The single dad millionaire at the next table watched her. It was a chilly Friday evening, the kind where the neon lights outside a modest downtown diner glowed against the damp sidewalks. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, fried chicken, and pie. Tucked into a corner booth sat a young woman named Emily. She clutched a tiny leather wallet that looked more worn than the hem of her faded coat. Inside that wallet was a single $5 bill, all she could spare for tonight. Emily had agreed to a blind date set up by a coworker who insisted, "You deserve someone who sees your heart, not your bank account." But Emily knew how the world often worked. In her 24 years, she had already learned that money was like a passport. Without it, doors remained closed, opportunities out of reach. The bell over the door jingled, and her date walked in. Tall, polished shoes, an expensive jacket, and an expression that carried entitlement. His name was Nathan. He slid into the booth with a glance at his phone, barely looking at her. "Order whatever you want," he said flatly, as though granting her a favor. Emily's eyes flicked to the menu. Burgers were $10, chicken plates were $12. She swallowed. The $5 bill in her wallet seemed to burn through the leather. She decided on the cheapest option, a small side of fries and water, pretending she was not very hungry. Nathan smirked. "That is all you are eating? You are not exactly making a good impression." Emily's cheeks burned. She wanted to explain, but pride stopped her. If she admitted the truth that she only had $5 and could not cover anything else, he would either laugh or pity her. She would rather sit in silence. At the next table, another man sat with a little boy who looked about 6 years old. The child had a toy car clutched in his hand and kept giggling as he rolled it across the table. His father, tall and broad-shouldered, wore a simple shirt with sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. Unlike Nathan, his gaze was gentle. He had noticed the scene unfolding across the aisle. The little boy tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, why does that lady look sad?" The man leaned closer to his son and whispered, "Shh, we should not stare." But his eyes lingered on Emily. He saw the way her shoulders stiffened when Nathan scoffed at her small order. He noticed the way she folded her napkin carefully, as though using manners to build a shield against humiliation. Emily tried to steer the conversation toward books and movies, but Nathan interrupted her with stories of expensive vacations in his latest luxury car. Each sentence felt like a performance designed to remind her of her place. When she finally laughed softly at one of his jokes, he leaned back and said, "I guess you are easily entertained." Her throat tightened. She excused herself, slipping to the restroom. There, under the harsh fluorescent light, she looked at her reflection. Her coat was second-hand, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She pressed her hands against the sink and whispered, "You can survive this. Just one night." Meanwhile, at the next table, the man with the little boy watched her return, chin lifted in quiet defiance. He admired that. Many people, when faced with humiliation, would crumble or lash out. She, however, carried herself with a dignity that even Nathan's arrogance could not erase. The waitress brought Nathan's steak and Emily's tiny plate of fries. Nathan cut into his meal, barely acknowledging her. "You should try real food," he muttered. Emily picked up one fry, forced a smile, and said nothing. Inside, her pride and her aching hunger fought a silent battle. Across the aisle, the boy whispered loudly, "Daddy, she is eating just fries." The man gave a small, reassuring smile, then met Emily's eyes for the first time. Their gazes locked for a brief second. Something flickered there, an unspoken recognition, a thread of empathy stretching between two strangers. Emily looked down quickly, heart pounding. She did not know that this simple, humiliating dinner would be the night that changed her life. She did not know that the man at the next table was more than just a kind, single dad. He was a millionaire, and soon, Their worlds would collide in ways she could never imagine. Nathan leaned back in the booth, chewing his steak with exaggerated satisfaction. He spoke between bites, his tone dismissive. I usually go to places much nicer than this. My last date was at a rooftop restaurant in Manhattan. The view was breathtaking. But I suppose for you, this diner is fine. Emily's fingers tightened around her fork. Every word felt like a deliberate reminder of the distance between his world and hers. She answered softly, "It is not about where you eat. It is about who you are with." Nathan gave a short laugh. "That is a sweet thought. But trust me, you will learn that money is everything. Without it, people do not respect you." Oh. The words cut deep, not because Emily believed them, but because they echoed the same lesson she had faced too many times. Rent notices pinned to her door. Classmates who once mocked her thrift store clothes. Bosses who overlooked her for promotions because she did not fit the polished image of success. At the next table, the man with the little boy shifted in his seat. He tried to focus on helping his son cut a slice of pie, but his eyes drifted back to Emily. He admired the way she held her chin high even when insulted. Her dignity was not for sale. The boy, whose name was Lucas, tugged his father's sleeve. "Daddy, that lady is nice." She smiled at me. His father glanced at Emily again, offering her a small nod of acknowledgement. She returned it, barely noticeable, but her heart warmed at the simple kindness. Back at her table, Nathan pushed his empty plate aside and checked his phone. "I have an appointment later. Let us make this quick." "Honestly, you are not what I expected." Emily's pulse quickened. She had been rejected before, but the bluntness stung. She thought about the $5 bill in her wallet, all she had to her name for this evening, and the humiliation of wasting it on a man who had already decided she was beneath him. Gathering her courage, she placed her fork down and met his eyes. "You do not have to insult me. If you are not interested, we can simply end the evening." Nathan smirked. "I just think you should know the reality. Men like me do not date women who cannot even buy a real meal." Across the aisle, Lucas gasped loudly. "That is mean!" The man quickly hushed his son, but Emily's lips trembled with the smallest smile. For the first time that evening, she felt someone had noticed the cruelty and dared to call it out, even if it was only a child. Nathan stood, tossing a few bills on the table. "Good luck, Emily. You will need it." With that, he walked out, leaving behind the sharp echo of his arrogance. Emily sat frozen, her cheeks burning. Part of her wanted to cry, but she refused to let tears fall in a public diner. She reached into her wallet, pulling out the $5 bill to pay for her fries. Her pride insisted she would not let a man like Nathan cover even the smallest portion of her meal. As she placed the money on the table, Lucas's toy car rolled across the aisle and bumped against her shoe. She bent down, picked it up gently, and handed it back to the little boy. "Here you go, sweetheart." Lucas grinned. "Thank you, lady." His father gave a grateful smile. "Sorry about that." He is still learning to keep his toys on the table. Emily shook her head. "No problem at all. He is adorable." For a brief moment, their eyes met again. There was no judgment in his gaze, only quiet understanding. Emily rose to leave, pulling her coat tight against her shoulders. She felt the weight of humiliation pressing down, but also the faint spark of resilience. She did not know the stranger at the next table had been watching her with interest that went beyond curiosity. She did not know that this small exchange of kindness would be the thread pulling her into a world completely unlike her own. As the diner door closed behind her, the night air felt sharp against her cheeks. Emily whispered to herself, "You are stronger than this." "Oh no." Inside, the man lifted his son into his arms. Lucas asked, "Daddy, why was that lady sad?" He pressed a gentle kiss to the boy's forehead. "Because some people forget that kindness is worth more than money." But in his heart, he knew this was not the last time he would see her. The following morning, Emily woke to the faint hum of traffic outside her tiny apartment window. The space was hardly more than a studio, with a bed pushed against the wall, a second-hand desk, and a cracked heater that rattled every few minutes. She brewed a single cup of coffee, stretching the grounds as far as she could. The memory of last night's blind date still stung like a fresh bruise. She opened her worn sketchbook, running her fingers across pages filled with drawings of dresses, coats, and shoes. Fashion had always been her secret dream, but dreams did not pay rent. She sighed, closed the sketchbook, and tucked it into her bag before heading to her shift at the bookstore. Across town, the man from the diner, whose name was Daniel, helped his son Lucas get ready for school. Daniel tied the boy's sneakers, while Lucas chattered about the lady they had seen last night. "Daddy, do you think we will see her again?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe. Sometimes life brings people back when we least expect it." Lucas tilted his head. "She was nice. You should be her friend." Daniel ruffled his son's hair. "We will see." But the truth was, she had stayed in his thoughts. There had been something in her eyes, a mixture of pride and quiet sorrow, that reminded him of the strength he admired most in people. Later that afternoon, fate nudged their paths together again. Emily was behind the counter at the bookstore, stacking a tower of new arrivals. The bell above the door jingled. She looked up, and there they were, Daniel and Lucas. Lucas spotted her first. "Daddy, it is the lady!" He rushed forward, waving his toy car in excitement. Emily's lips parted in surprise. "Well, hello again," she said warmly. "And how is your car today?" Lucas beamed. "It is racing faster than ever." Daniel approached with a polite smile. "We were in the neighborhood and needed a few books for school. I hope we are not interrupting." "Not at all," Emily replied, though her cheeks flushed. She had not expected to see them again so soon. As Daniel browsed the shelves with Lucas, Emily caught herself sneaking glances. He carried himself with quiet confidence, not the showy arrogance of men like Nathan. There was something grounding about him, as though wealth or status did not define his worth. She did not yet know his full story, but she felt an inexplicable pull. Lucas returned to the counter holding a children's adventure book. "Can we get this one, Daddy?" Daniel nodded. "Of course." Then he looked at Emily. "Do you like to read?" Her smile was shy but genuine. "Whenever I can. Books are the cheapest way to travel the world." Their eyes lingered on each other a moment longer than necessary. The bell chimed again as another customer entered, breaking the spell. Daniel paid for the book, thanked her, and began to leave. But before the door closed, Lucas turned back. "Bye, nice lady." Emily laughed softly. "Goodbye, Lucas." When the store grew quiet again, Emily pressed a hand against her chest. For the first time in months, her heart felt lighter. That evening, walking home under the fading glow of streetlights, Emily replayed the encounter in her mind. She told herself it was only coincidence. Yet something whispered that life was weaving a pattern far larger than she could see. Meanwhile, in his car, Daniel glanced at his son in the rearview mirror. Lucas was already lost in the pages of his new book, but Daniel's thoughts were elsewhere. He wondered what it would take to see Emily smile, without the shadow of worry behind her eyes. He had the means to change her world in an instant, but he held back. To reveal too soon would risk everything. For now, he chose patience. Sometimes the greatest stories begin not with grand gestures, but with the smallest moments: a smile exchanged, a book purchased, a toy car rolling across the floor. Neither of them knew it yet. But last night's humiliation at the diner was only the beginning. Their lives were already entangled, and destiny was quietly guiding them toward a truth neither could avoid. The next weekend, Emily found herself working an extra shift at the bookstore. Saturdays were always busier, families coming in to browse while children darted between the aisles. She wore her usual faded cardigan, the sleeves pushed up as she organized a cart of returned books. Her mind was half on her work, half on the rent notice that had been slipped under her door that morning. The bell above the entrance jingled, and Emily's breath caught when she looked up. Daniel and Lucas had returned. Lucas ran straight toward her with the boundless energy only a child could have. "Hi, nice lady," he exclaimed, holding up his toy car. Emily crouched to his level. "Well, hello, Lucas. That car seems to be having many adventures." Lucas grinned and leaned closer, whispering loudly. "Daddy says adventures are better when you have friends." Emily's cheeks warmed as she stood, glancing at Daniel. He gave a small, almost apologetic smile. "He insisted we stop by again." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You are always welcome here." Daniel asked about book recommendations for Lucas, and together they walked through the children's section. Emily pulled titles from the shelves, explaining each one with gentle enthusiasm. Lucas listened intently, his eyes wide. Daniel watched Emily more than the books. He noticed how patient she was, how she bent down to Lucas's level to explain things, never talking down to him. After choosing 2 books, Daniel insisted on buying one for Lucas and one for Emily. "You should treat yourself," he said. She shook her head quickly. "I cannot accept that. Thank you, but no." Daniel did not press, but his respect for her only deepened. He recognized her pride, the same kind of pride that would rather go hungry than be pitied. As the store began to quiet near closing time, Emily noticed Lucas yawning. She leaned down to the boy. "Did you have fun today?" Lucas nodded sleepily. "Yes. Can we see you again?" Emily smiled tenderly. "I would like that." Daniel gathered the books and thanked her once more. As they walked out into the fading light, Emily felt an ache in her chest. The connection she felt with them was growing stronger, yet she reminded herself not to hope too much. Men like Daniel were kind, but they belonged to worlds she could never touch. That evening, Emily returned to her small apartment. She set her sketchbook on the desk and opened to a blank page. Without thinking, she began to sketch a little boy holding a toy car. His face lit up with laughter. Next to him, she drew the outline of a tall man with kind eyes. She paused, staring at the page, realizing just how deeply they had already slipped into her heart. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in his living room with Lucas asleep on the couch beside him, the new book resting on the boy's chest. Daniel thought about Emily. He admired her resilience, the way she held her ground with grace, even when life seemed determined to test her. He could have told her the truth, that he was not just a single father in a rolled-up shirt, but a millionaire who owned more than one company. He could have offered to pay her rent for the next year without blinking, but he stayed silent. He wanted her to see him as a man first, not a bank account. In the quiet of that night, Emily whispered to herself, "Do not fall for someone out of reach." Yet her heart betrayed her with every beat, remembering Lucas's laughter and Daniel's steady eyes. Across town, Daniel whispered to his sleeping son, "Sometimes the right people appear when we least expect them." Now, neither of them knew how quickly their worlds were about to collide once again, in a way that would strip away disguises and reveal truths too powerful to ignore. On Monday afternoon, Emily sat at the bookstore counter with her sketchbook open in front of her. It had been a slow day, only a handful of customers coming in. She doodled absent-mindedly, filling the page with rough outlines of dresses inspired by the flowing pages of books she had handled. Her stomach tightened when she remembered the overdue rent notice. By the end of the week, she would need to find a way to pay or face eviction. The bell over the door jingled, and once again, Daniel and Lucas walked in. Lucas ran straight to the counter, climbing onto the stool with a grin. "We found you again," Emily laughed softly. "It looks like you are making this store your second home." Daniel placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his smile faint but warm. "He begged me to stop by on the way home from school." Lucas spotted the sketchbook and pointed. "Did you draw that?" Emily quickly closed the cover, embarrassed. "Just a hobby," she said lightly. Daniel tilted his head, curiosity in his eyes. Those sketches looked professional. Her cheeks flushed. "No, I just draw for myself." But Lucas insisted, "Show us, please." Hesitantly, Emily opened the book again, revealing pages of elegant dresses, coats, and shoes. Daniel leaned closer, his expression thoughtful. "These are not just doodles, Emily. They are designs, real designs." She shrugged. "Dreams do not pay the bills." Daniel's gaze lingered on her, wanting to say more, but he held back. Instead, he asked Lucas to pick out a new book while he stayed by the counter. For a few minutes, silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. At that moment, 2 well-dressed women entered the store, their perfume sharp in the air. They browsed briefly before whispering to each other, their eyes landing on Emily. One of them sneered loudly enough for Emily to hear. "She is working here now? I thought she would have quit by now. Some people just do not know when to give up." Emily's shoulders stiffened, but she forced a smile as she checked their books out at the register. She had endured comments like these her whole life. Yet somehow, knowing Daniel and Lucas were standing nearby made the sting sharper. She hated the thought of them seeing her diminished like this. When the women left, Daniel spoke gently. "You handled that with grace." Emily's voice was quiet. "I am used to it." Lucas returned with a book clutched to his chest. "Daddy, can we get this one?" Daniel paid, but before leaving, he turned back to Emily. "You should not hide your talent. The world needs to see what you can create." She gave a small laugh, though her eyes shone with something more fragile. "The world does not care about people like me." After they left, Emily closed her sketchbook and pressed it against her heart. For years she had been told she was not enough. Yet Daniel's words echoed in her mind, planting a seed she could not ignore. That night, Emily sat at her desk, sketching long after midnight. She imagined fabrics, colors, and runways, letting her pencil dance across the paper. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to believe she was capable of more than survival. Meanwhile, Daniel tucked Lucas into bed. As he watched his son drift to sleep, he thought of Emily's determination. He admired her strength, but he also sensed the battles she fought silently. He wanted to help her, to lift some of that weight, yet he feared that revealing his true wealth would destroy the fragile trust forming between them. In the quiet, he whispered to himself, "If she knew who I really was, would she walk away?" Neither of them realized that the fragile line between their worlds was growing thinner, and soon the truth would no longer stay hidden. Destiny was pushing them toward a revelation neither could avoid. By Thursday evening, the bookstore was nearly empty when the landlord arrived. He was a heavy-set man with a booming voice, and he spoke loudly enough that even customers browsing at the far shelves could hear. "Emily, I cannot wait any longer. The rent is overdue. If you do not have the money by tomorrow, you will need to vacate." Emily's face burned with humiliation. She glanced at the clock, wishing desperately that no one she knew would walk through the door at that moment. But fate had other plans. The bell above the entrance jingled, and in walked Daniel with Lucas, carrying a stack of schoolwork under his arm. The landlord continued, oblivious to her silent plea. "You are a nice girl, but business is business. Tomorrow is the deadline." With that, he stormed out, leaving Emily trembling behind the counter. Lucas blinked up at her with innocent curiosity. Why was that man so mad? Emily forced a smile, her voice unsteady. "Just a misunderstanding, sweetheart." But Daniel's eyes had already darkened. He had heard enough to understand. He approached the counter slowly, his tone careful. "Emily, is everything all right?" Her pride flared. "Yes, of course. Thank you for asking." She tried to busy herself with the register, avoiding his gaze. Lucas tugged on his father's sleeve. "Daddy, can we help her?" Emily's cheeks burned even hotter. "No, really, it is fine." Daniel studied her for a long moment. He could have offered to cover her rent on the spot. The amount was nothing to him, less than what he spent in an afternoon on his company's expenses. But he saw the rigid set of her shoulders, the way her hands trembled as she stacked books. Pride was her armor, and if he tried to pierce it with money, she would push him away. Instead, he shifted the subject gently. "Lucas has been talking non-stop about your drawings. He says you are an artist." Emily exhaled slowly, grateful for the change. "Not an artist, just someone who sketches." Lucas shook his head firmly. "No, they are beautiful." "Daddy, tell her." Daniel's eyes softened. "He is right. You should believe in your own talent." For the rest of their visit, he kept the conversation light, asking about books and letting Lucas chatter happily. Yet beneath the surface, tension lingered. Emily sensed he had seen too much, and part of her ached with both gratitude and shame. After closing the store, Emily walked home alone under the dim glow of street lamps. The chill in the night air cut through her coat, but her thoughts were louder than the cold. Tomorrow was the deadline. She had less than 24 hours to find a solution. In another part of town, Daniel sat in his office after putting Lucas to bed. The office walls were lined with awards and framed contracts, each representing years of success that the world celebrated. But tonight, none of it mattered. He thought of Emily's trembling hands, her forced smile, the fire in her eyes when she refused pity. He whispered to himself, "How do I help her without losing her trust?" Daniel knew the moment of truth was approaching. He had kept his identity hidden, choosing to meet her as a man, not as a millionaire. But soon, circumstances would strip away that choice. She would discover who he truly was. As the clock ticked past midnight, Emily sat at her desk, sketchbook open, tears blurring the lines on the page. She drew not gowns or shoes this time, but a small boy with a toy car, and behind him, a man whose steady gaze gave her strength. She pressed her forehead against the paper and whispered, Do not give up. You cannot give up. And somewhere across the city, Daniel stared out his window at the skyline, knowing tomorrow could change everything. The next morning, Emily woke with a knot in her stomach. The landlord's deadline had arrived. She dressed quickly, tying her hair back, and walked to the bookstore, praying she could somehow delay the inevitable. By midday, the landlord stormed in once more, his voice booming. "Emily, I gave you time. If you do not pay today, I will have no choice but to evict you." His words carried across the store, turning the heads of several customers. Emily's face flushed. She whispered, "Please, can we talk privately?" But before she could move, the bell above the door jingled. Daniel and Lucas entered. Daniel froze. As he caught the scene, Emily cornered, humiliated, clutching her hands together as if holding herself upright. The landlord sneered. "If you cannot even afford rent, maybe you should not waste time doodling in sketchbooks. Some people are not meant to dream." Emily's throat tightened. She felt exposed, stripped of dignity. Her pride urged her to stand tall, but her heart cracked under the weight of his cruelty. Before she could respond, Daniel's voice cut through the tension, calm but firm. "That is enough." The landlord turned, ready to bark back, but his expression faltered. Daniel stepped forward with a presence that shifted the air in the room. He no longer seemed like just a kind, single father. His posture, his tone, even the authority in his eyes revealed something more. "Do not speak to her that way," Daniel said evenly. "You have no idea who she is or what she is capable of." The landlord scoffed. "And who are you to interfere?" For the first time, Emily saw Daniel differently. There was weight behind his words, a quiet power that could not be faked. The customers in the store watched in silence, as Daniel's gaze hardened. "I am someone who does not tolerate bullies," he answered. Then, almost reluctantly, he added, "And I am also the man who owns this building." Gasps rippled through the store. Emily's breath caught. She turned to him, her heart pounding. "What did you just say?" Daniel looked at her, his voice softening. "Emily, I should have told you sooner. I am not only Lucas's father. I am also the one who purchased this entire block last year. I wanted you to know me as a man first, not as a millionaire." Emily staggered back a step, shock flooding her veins. The sketches, the kindness, the quiet strength, it all suddenly aligned with this new truth. Yet instead of relief, a surge of betrayal rose in her chest. "You lied to me," she whispered. Daniel's eyes pleaded. "No. I never lied about who I am inside. I only hid the rest because I needed you to see me, not the money." But Emily's pride, already bruised by the landlord's cruelty, could not bear the revelation. With tears brimming in her eyes, she shook her head and fled the store, leaving Daniel and Lucas standing in stunned silence. For the first time since they had met, distance yawned between them, an unbridgeable chasm of truth and pride. Emily ran through the streets, her vision blurred by tears. The chill of the autumn wind stung her face, but nothing hurt more than the weight in her chest. She felt foolish, tricked into believing she had finally found someone who understood her. All along, Daniel had been living a life she could never touch. That evening, she sat in her dim apartment surrounded by sketches scattered across the desk. The $5 bill she had once clung to still rested in her wallet, now feeling like a symbol of the unbridgeable distance between her and Daniel. She whispered to herself, "You were a fool to believe. Kindness could erase the difference between your worlds." Across town, Daniel paced his office. Lucas sat nearby, worried. "Daddy, why did she leave? She likes us. I know she does." Daniel knelt beside his son. "Sometimes, people get scared when they learn the truth. She thinks I was pretending." Lucas frowned. "But you were just being you. You were nice. You helped. That is the truth." Daniel hugged his son tightly. "I hope she sees that someday." The following afternoon, fate brought them together again. Emily had gone to a local cafe to drop off job applications, desperate to find extra work. As she waited in line, a familiar, mocking voice rose behind her. Nathan, the man from her disastrous blind date, smirked as he recognized her. "Well, if it is not the $5 girl," he sneered. "I heard you were working in a bookstore. And now, cafes? What is next? Washing dishes?" Emily stiffened, humiliation burning her skin. The cafe grew silent as a few people turned to stare. Nathan continued, louder this time. "You see, Some people are meant to shine, and some are meant to serve. No amount of daydreaming will change that. Before Emily could respond, another voice rang out from across the cafe. Calm, strong, undeniable. That is enough. Daniel stepped forward, his presence commanding the room. He had followed Lucas's tug to the cafe, and now he stood between Emily and Nathan, his eyes cold with authority. Nathan laughed. And who are you supposed to be? Daniel's reply was steady. I am the man who will not let you speak to her that way. The cafe went quiet, every eye fixed on the confrontation. Emily's heart pounded. She wanted to flee, but something rooted her in place. She saw not the millionaire, not the powerful man, but the father who read books with his son, the man who had defended her dignity from the shadows long before she knew his name. Nathan scoffed and stormed out, leaving only silence behind. Daniel turned to Emily, his voice softer now. You do not deserve their cruelty. You never did. Her pride still warred with the sting of betrayal. But for the first time since the revelation, Emily's defenses wavered. Deep inside, she wondered if she had judged him too quickly. The cafe remained hushed after Nathan stormed out. Emily stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest, torn between gratitude and the heavy sting of betrayal that still clung to her. Daniel looked at her, not as a man of wealth and power, but simply as himself. His voice was low, steady, and filled with sincerity. Emily, I never wanted you to feel small. I only wanted you to see me for who I am, not for what I own. Tears blurred her vision. She whispered, All my life, people judged me for what I did not have. I thought you were different. But when I found out the truth, it felt like you were testing me, like I was just another project to prove that money can fix everything. Daniel stepped closer, his tone aching with honesty. You are not a project. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. Your strength, your dignity, the way you carry yourself even when the world tries to break you, that is what I see. That is what I fell in love with. Emily's breath caught. The cafe patrons, sensing the weight of the moment, turned away politely, leaving them in a fragile bubble of silence. Lucas tugged on Emily's sleeve with his small hand. His eyes were wide, innocent, but filled with certainty. Please do not be mad at my daddy. He really likes you, and I like you too. Her heart cracked open. She knelt down to Lucas's level, brushing a tear from her cheek. I like you too, Lucas. When she stood, Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a familiar object. The same worn $5 bill she had once placed on the diner table that humiliating night. He had quietly asked the waitress for it after she left, keeping it as a reminder of her pride. He held it out now, his voice steady. This $5 does not represent poverty, it represents courage. You stood tall that night, even when you were mocked. That is the woman I admire. That is the woman I want by my side. Emily stared at the bill, her chest tightening. Slowly, she reached out and placed her hand over his. For the first time, the wall between them began to crumble. With the courage that had carried her through every hardship, she whispered, If we do this, it cannot be about money. It has to be about trust and respect and love. Daniel's eyes glistened as he nodded. It will always be about that. Nothing else. In the quiet hum of the cafe, he took her hand. Lucas wrapped his arms around both of them, laughing in delight. For the first time, Emily felt the heavy weight of class and judgment lift from her shoulders. She realized that true wealth was not measured in dollars or possessions, but in kindness, integrity, and love that dared to bridge impossible divides. As they walked out together into the golden glow of the afternoon sun, the three of them side by side, Emily knew her life would never be the same. This was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, one written not by status, but by heart.